And that is a young man freaking out because he was killed in his video game. You know the one, Fortnite. Said to be so addictive that it's even causing couples to get divorced. British MPs are so concerned that over the past week they've been questioning the makers of Fortnite and other games, accusing them of making a monster. Are they right, or is this all a bit overblown?
In the world of gaming, there's no escaping the power of Fortnite.
Everyone's playing Fortnite.
A global phenomenon played by millions of children and adults.
Players join teams and battle up to 100 others to be the last person standing.
It's ultra competitive, but the biggest thing is it's free to play.
The game is free, but players can pay for accessories to make their battles more colorful.
Like costumes and dance moves for their avatars.
And that translates into big revenue for developer Epic Games.
$126 million.
$233 million.
Over $300 million in revenue last month alone.
Fortnite is drawing millions of players, and some parents are worrying their kids are spending way too much time at the controls.
Our children have become total addicts.
Is it addictive?
I wouldn't say it's addictive, but it's a good way to pass time.
Prince Harry says the popular video game should be banned because it's addictive.
Connections between technology and addiction. Scientifically, there's really not a lot there. We've done dozens of studies. We looked at data from literally tens of thousands of British young people.
A 9-year-old British girl's been placed in rehab for her addiction to online gaming.
Fortnite rehabs are now opening in some parts of the country.
Addiction to gaming now so prevalent, the World Health Organization classifies it as a disorder.
The popular video game Fortnite has been cited in more than 200 divorces just this year alone.
There has been divorces and people can't get their children out of this game and they sit there like zombies.
This is one of those viral games that is literally sucking productivity out of schools, out of workplaces.
I'm so sick of the media putting a negative spin on video games. It's insulting, man. The times are changing. You know what? Good morning, America. Hey, good morning. Wake up. Wake up!
That last soundbite there from a very famous gamer named Ninja, who makes millions of dollars a year simply playing Fortnite. People just love to watch him play games. Time for our panel now. Let's bring them in. We've got there in the top left, Daria Kuss. She's a psychologist specializing in gaming addiction. To the right, Mark Sorrell, game developer who's worked on things like Angry Birds. And he says it's primarily down to the individual to control their gaming habits. And finally, Cam Adair. Now, he knows all about the dark side of gaming, a former addict who travels the world now, trying to help others break their addiction. Welcome to you all. Cam, if we could just start with you. Tell us about your experience and how you identified your own addiction.
For me, initially, gaming was just a fun hobby I had. It was a way to just kind of relax after school and hockey. But when I began to experience a lot of bullying in the 8th grade when I was 13, I escaped into gaming. And I ended up actually dropping out of high school. I never went to college. I was gaming up to 16 hours a day, pretending to have jobs, deceiving my family. And eventually I wrote a suicide note. And it was at that point when I realized I need to make a change.
Why would it drive you to such an extreme situation as contemplating suicide?
For me, as much as gaming allowed me to escape, it didn't actually fix any of my problems. So I could game and game and game and just forget about dealing with anything. But when I turn the game off and I look around and my life is still in the same place, you know, eventually I no longer felt like I could actually break away from it and move on with my life. And, you know, that's where I got to.
Daria, this is why, presumably, the WHO, the World Health Organization, has designated it officially as a gaming disorder. Just explain what does the term mean, gaming disorder?
So here at Nottingham Trent University, we've been doing research at the International Gaming Research Unit, assessing gaming disorder really for over 10 years now. And gaming disorder, I think the one crucial feature that would distinguish any kind of problematic or pathological gaming from gaming that is normal, healthy, is the fact that it's got a significant negative impact on the individual's life in such a way that they are not able to control their behaviors anymore, in such a way that they may require professional help in order to overcome overcome the kinds of problems that Cam has described earlier. And really, I think it's a very important step in the right direction of research and clinical treatment, as well as possible prevention efforts, that we've now got an official diagnosis of gaming disorder.
Mark, as a developer, are you and is your industry aware of people like Cam and their experiences?
I think there is some level of awareness that this is possible, but I'd also say that there are billions of people who play video games in a healthy way with no harm whatsoever. And as Cam mentioned, he used games as a way to escape from his problems. And it's not necessarily gaming itself which was the issue, but the person. And an individual can be addicted and have disorders around many other normal activities.
Well, that's perhaps the issue, and why British MPs over the last couple of weeks have been questioning game makers, including the game maker Epic, which makes Fortnite, and EA, which makes the FIFA series. It was actually a pretty difficult, tedious few hours to watch if you're not familiar with all the subject matter. But it did warm up when an MP said, essentially, to the game makers that they've created an addictive monster. Have a listen.
We had a young man before us on this committee who was an undergraduate and managed to play 32 hours straight. And my colleague Simon Hart just brought up an issue of a young girl of 9 years old who, whilst playing Fortnite, refused to leave the game and as a result wet herself. So there are issues of addiction. In a sense, it might be fair to say you're creating a fun game and everything, but inadvertently along the way you're creating a monster. Are you, as an industry, going to take responsibility in the future?
I would tell you that Electronic Arts already is a very responsible company. We make games that we put out that are purposefully made to enjoy in a healthy way. We work closely with our industry colleagues to provide tools, to provide information. We aren't able to go out and diagnose individuals. We aren't able to go into their home and tell them how to play.
But arguably, you are able to see how long people are sitting at their consoles watching your game. And if you can see somebody playing your game for sort of 10 hours at a straight stretch, this has got to be unhealthy.
So I mean this in a very respectful way. But why can I say that? How can I say that? Has a doctor said that playing for 10 hours straight is unhealthy?
No.
Back to Daria. Let's put that question to her. Daria, 10 hours straight playing computer games, is that a problem, or is that not yet crossed the threshold?
So in my research, I have been assessing the amount of time that gamers actually spend playing games. And certainly, even though we can consider it to be a criterion of possibly problematic use, it's not the one distinguishing criterion. So really, just spending a lot of time playing games doesn't necessarily suffice to, cause somebody addicted to playing a game. I think there are a number of significantly more important criteria that need to be met in order for a person to be diagnosed with gaming addiction. So just because a player enjoys playing the game and they may be spending lots of time.
Right, well, Daria, if the definition of a problem at the WHO is that you're spending so much time playing games that it actually takes the place of other activities to a detrimental effect, surely 10 hours at a stretch is going to affect your education or your job or your relationships.
It can, in some circumstances, affect an individual's life in terms of their education, in terms of their relationships, in terms of their professional careers. However, our research here at Nottingham Trent University has showed that in many circumstances, even if gamers spend 10 hours a day playing the game, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will have a significant problem. In many cases, yes, it's a good indicator. However, it doesn't necessarily qualify for diagnosis just because they spend a lot of time playing online games.
Cam, did you ever sit down for 10 hours at a stretch playing games?
The point that my mom knew it was a problem for me was she was curious how long I would game before I would stop. And she turned the timer on, 15 hours went by. She came downstairs and said, Cam, it's time to get off. And I said, why? I just started playing. And games are so immersive and compelling that you can sit there and play for 15 hours straight and not even really realize it. Now, I do believe, Daria, when it's not a specific amount of time is the main criteria, but if someone's playing 10, 15 hours a day, that's certainly something we should be looking at.
Mark, don't you think your industry should acknowledge that if someone's sitting down for 10, 15 hours a day, there's a problem?
Well, as the other two guests have said, it's not necessarily the amount of time that's a problem. It's whether or not that's impacting on their life outside of the game. I'd say it's hard to spend 10 to 15 hours sat down doing the same thing without noticing it. But biological needs will come into effect to stop
yeah, I mean, the
you.
MP actually said that one little girl actually sat there and wet herself. She couldn't tear herself away from the game. That was the evidence given to him. You know, they asked Epic, did they ensure that players didn't spend too much money and time? And Epic said they didn't monitor that sort of thing, as the gamer has responsibility. Is that your position as well?
I'd say it's extremely difficult to know what an individual's financial or time situation is. It's very difficult to know how much too much money is for somebody. There are people who can spend $1 million in a game and not even notice, and people for whom spending $10 is a significant investment. Likewise with time, there are people who can, if they wish, spend 16 hours a day playing a game and suffer no ill effects to the rest of their life. And there are other people for whom every minute, every hour counts. So it is impossible to have an objective standard for how much is too much.
But if it was in the gaming industry's interest to know, could they technically find out and monitor people and help them?
Well, you can know how long someone has spent playing, and you can know how much money they have spent, certainly. But as I said, it's impossible to then measure that against any external objective yardstick, because each individual has different circumstances, and it's up to them to spend their time and their money the way they wish. That's one of the most important freedoms in our society, I think. So for game companies to then start clamping down, saying, oh, you can't do this as much as you wish to, doesn't feel right to me.
Okay. Well, you know, worldwide, it's estimated that 1 in 3 people, 2.3 billion of us, play video games. In the United States, that rises to around 70% who are gamers. Now, the average age is not 15, not 25, but 35, and they spend, on average, around 7 hours a week playing. Fortnite is the most popular iPhone gaming app in the United States, and players do take it a bit seriously sometimes.
Okay, dude, yeah.
What the
Yo, what the hey, relax, buddy.
What the 20 damage? This game is a joke!
How many?
Goodbye, Tilted Towers.
Yeah, you mother.
Well, it's only natural the game makers try to make their games as engaging as possible, but do they deliberately try to make them addictive? Let's take a look. The morning commute to work, and the young man opposite is staring intensely at his mobile phone. What is he doing? Sending an important email to his colleagues? Perhaps getting up to date with the news? An urgent text message? No, he's playing Candy Crush. So simple. Just line them up and pop. Yet so addictive. Other games like PUBG and Fortnite are comparatively complicated and also leave you wanting more. How do they do it? Well, the most important thing is to make a really good game. For example, it took hundreds of people and 6 years to make Fortnite, and it just works. It distracts people from their boring lives, makes them feel like they've achieved something, and it's an exciting adventure without ever leaving your seat. A dose of dopamine at the push of a button. But that's just half the story. Developers use a range of techniques to keep you hooked. It starts with being free to play. You're allowed to do really well, smashing your way through new levels and earning reward after reward from the so-called loot boxes or treasure chests. A new hat, a more powerful weapon, new dance moves. But then you plateau and progress is slower. You have to play more and more for fewer and fewer little rewards. When you do get them, they're even more satisfying. The industry calls this the variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. Of course, to speed things up, you can pay real money for a few pixels of whatever. Another technique, developers know just when to cut you off when you're at your most invested, always leaving you wanting more. They sometimes call this the hedonic treadmill. Essentially, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And later, in case you should put the game down for too long, you'll receive a notification. Don't forget to collect your free whatever it is. You wouldn't want to lose all that progress you've spent hours and hours building up. And there we have it. Free to play, regular rewards, notifications and little sparkly things that go pop. Time flies when you're having fun, and even when you're not. Back to Mark now, who makes games for a living. Mark, your objective when you're making a game is to make it as engaging as possible. In what ways do you make it engaging as opposed to addictive?
Well, I think a game, as was mentioned in the report, has to be fun, has to be enjoyable in order for people to want to play it over a long period of time. I think it's a case of making sure that their brain is very satisfied by the tasks they're being asked to do. It's a case of making the game beautiful. It's a case of making the game fundamentally something their brain really enjoys. Games are all about learning systems, learning mastery, and then being able to express yourself in that system. And so it's extremely important that for a game to be engaging, it needs to be fundamentally interesting to your brain. And that's not the same as addiction.
Yeah, I can see the difference. I mean, engaging means the art is good, the storylines, are good, and you have a certain amount of stages of difficulty which you get through and you feel rewarded. Why then do you have little elements within the game, such as the loot boxes and the notifications, that that keeps dripping the dopamine in, as they say?
Because people enjoy those things, and as has been pointed out, there are several billion people playing games around the world, and they all enjoy feeling that experience. It's a very enjoyable experience.
Cam,
it's not something that most people have a problem with.
Yeah, Cam, most people don't have a problem with it, but you had a problem with it, right?
Well, that's the difference, is that the gaming industry has shown that they have done all the research on what makes the game fun and engaging, but they have not done any research on whether or not there's potential harm. And based on the Select Committee's testimony and these hearings that have been going on, Damian Collins pointed out yesterday that there clearly is no intention by the gaming industry to look into these potential harms. And at the moment, there are tens of thousands of people coming forward asking for help. So ultimately, the gaming industry is coming to a crossroads moment of having to decide, are they going to start taking responsibility and start evaluating their own games for potential harm, or are they going to be regulated into it like the tobacco industry and the gambling industry before them?
Dario, when you look at games, do you see just engagement there being sought, or mechanisms within the games that actually are designed to addict people?
There are certainly a number of mechanisms, structural characteristics of a game which we have analyzed here, which we have researched here, which may contribute to the addictive potential of particular online games, where these kinds of mechanisms, these kinds of structures make it more likely for the player to engage over extended periods of time, which make the player more likely to keep coming back to the game, to maintain possibly excessive problematic game playing patterns. But in any case, I think, when we're thinking about substances which are currently, or which have been classified as potentially addictive, let's take alcohol, for example. Just because alcohol is potentially addictive, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to rule it out. What it means, though, is that we need to increase the social responsibility of the gaming industry, of companies that are producing the games, to really ensure that the players are kept safe. And at the same time, players need to have an increased awareness about the possible problems that can emerge as a consequence of excessive engagement.
Dario, so what is the role of dopamine in addiction in terms of gaming, for example?
A rewarding experience will release dopamine in our brains. So basically, dopamine is a chemical in our brains that's being released within our pleasure pathway in order to make us feel happy. And over time, when that release happens on a regular basis, we associate the activity with which we're engaging in. So, for example, the online gaming with the rewarding experience, and therefore our brain learns over time, it's being conditioned to engage in the activity because the activity makes us happy. And that explains how possibly problematic or addictive behaviors such as gaming can be maintained over time
and just
because
briefly,
they make us happy.
Just briefly, do gamers exploit the knowledge of that?
You could potentially say that gamers exploit the knowledge of that. I mean, certainly, when people play online games, then of course they are engaged. Of course they enjoy the activity. Of course the activity brings them pleasure. And therefore they will over time learn to engage in it more and will create that kind of feeling, that state of happiness, of euphoria, which they will be seeking over time and maintain the behaviors over time.
Well, the debate over addiction has not been settled. The science is still disputed. But anecdotally, there is evidence there to say it can make life hell. We spoke to one mother who knows just how serious excessive gaming can be.
My son is 29 years old and he's a gaming addict. He's been playing games from 6 years old. He would break into my office when the office was locked to go and play games. He'd not go to school or go to school and come back during the day while I was at work and go and, play games. We had so many fights with him and his computer games. I've destroyed computers, I've thrown them out, I've literally broken them to pieces. Even my own computer inside the house, so he could not play a game. I eventually had to bring in social workers and the police because he got very violent with me. He was 14. He did change when he went to boarding school because there he was forced to go and play in sport. So he actually became a captain of all his sports teams. He was so good at sports. He really did well at school. Then he decided he did not want to go to university like the rest of his friends. He wanted to do a gap year, and his gap year became now 11 years of a gap year. And he still hasn't finished any type of studying. He can't keep a job. He's gaming for 15, 16 hours a day. I think as a parent I was enabling him with his addiction by helping him financially every month because he could not pay his rent or he could not buy himself food, not realizing that he was not working really. He wasn't even looking for work. He was playing games. I've said to him, I don't care what you do for a living, I just want you to stop playing games. I'd really love for you to go traveling, go travel the world. You've been here and you've sat inside your flat for the last 5 or 6 years just playing games. You're disintegrating.
Let's go back to Cam Adair now. He's somebody who will recognise all of that. Cam, you do recognise that sort of pattern of behaviour. What would you advise?
These are stories I hear every single day, and they're really heartbreaking. The first thing is just know that you're not alone. There are a lot of other people out there looking for help and supporting each other. We have a community on Facebook now for parents that has over 1,100 members. And so there are a lot of peers out there. Also, work with a professional. Be able to really work on not just the gamer, but also the family. The family relationship, I think, needs to be rebuilt. And, most importantly, just try, never give up, keep looking for answers.
Your organisation, Game Quitters, sent 2 delegates to the MP's questioning in London. Did they get a sense that there was a willingness for the game makers and the legislators to come together to improve things, or not? Are they not at that stage yet?
I've been very impressed with the Select Committee on this issue. I feel like they've asked a lot of really good questions and been holding the gaming industry accountable to not just buying their talking points. And I think that's where the difference is. We do have a lot of people coming forward asking for help. We need to help them. We need to do more. And ultimately, it's coming down to, will the industry actually take action, or will they just continue to pay lip service?
Well, that's a good question, Mark. Do you think there's a willingness amongst game makers to start to work with healthcare professionals and with legislators to put into place some sort of support for gamers to make sure they don't go off the deep end?
I very much think that game companies are interested in having healthy long-term relationships with players. So I'm pretty sure that as more is learnt, that it will be something that happens. As the industry matures, it's getting a better and better idea about how to create something that is genuinely engaging and keeps people interested in the long term, but without having negative side effects and without causing addictive behaviours.
Dario, do you think now, with the WHO designating it a sort of a gaming disorder, there will be moves to legislate and to regulate the industry more? For example, South Korea, before that decision, was saying that there's a ban between the hours of 12 and 6 o'clock in the morning on children playing games. Is there going to be more regulation like that coming into effect as a result of what the WHO is doing?
I am pretty sure that there will be increasing recognition of the requirement of having additional regulation and also really increasing social responsibility on behalf of the gaming companies. And I think also, in addition to this, having that kind of diagnosis is really good for individuals who are suffering from the problems themselves, because that means we can do additional research, we can get additional research funding in order to understand the problems better. And at the same time, we have a social political framework on which to base any kind of help and support measures, treatment measures, prevention efforts, raising awareness, etc. So in my opinion, and also as being part of the WHO working group on addictive behaviors, I'm very happy that we have managed to actually get gaming disorder into the diagnostic manual to the benefit of those individuals who are being concerned by it.
Just finally, on sort of substantive efforts to help addicted gamers, the NHS in Britain, where you are, was supposed to fund a gaming addiction centre, and then it just sort of went by the by. Did anything happen with that?
Well, what we know from the UK context is that there are currently ongoing talks that are happening, but from my understanding, the NHS is keen to support individuals who are experiencing problems as a consequence of their excessive gaming, similar to how they're supporting gamblers who are using gambling excessively and who are detrimentally impacted by the extent of their gambling-related problems.
So help could be on the way. Well, Daria Kuss, thank you very much. And Mark Sorrell and Cam Adair, thank you all for your contributions to the Nexus today. And thank you also for watching. Remember, you can see this and all our previous episodes on our YouTube channel. But for now, goodbye and see you next week.